What happens when a tightly controlled television institution meets a guest who refuses to be managed and a host whose power comes not from volume, but from silence? What happens when the red light is already on, the audience is leaning forward, and no one can hit rewind? The studio lights are brighter than they look on screen. They always are. There's a particular heat to them, a quiet pressure that presses down on everyone seated within their glow. The chairs are angled just enough to suggest conversation, but not comfort. The clock on the wall ticks in seconds no one ever hears at home. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer mouths 30 seconds and holds up 2 fingers. The music fades. The floor manager points. The red light snaps on. Anderson Cooper doesn't move much when the show goes live. He never has. That's part of his authority. Stillness, posture, eye contact. He looks directly at the camera for the opening line, voice even, practiced, calm. The kind of calm that tells you he's done this 1,000 times and survived worse than whatever tonight might bring. Across from him, Meghan Markle sits perfectly straight. Her hands are folded, then unfold, then fold again, a small adjustment, a breath that comes a half second too late. She smiles, but it's a smile that feels rehearsed, held in place by willpower more than ease. The audience doesn't notice yet. The cameras do. This was meant to be a conversation, a reflective interview, a chance to clarify, to reclaim, to reset the narrative. That's what the booking notes said. That's what everyone agreed on, at least on paper. This was supposed to be normal until it wasn't. What happens when a conversation designed to be controlled slips out of everyone's hands in real time? What happens when the red light is on, the audience is watching, and 2 people realize at the exact same moment that neither of them is willing to give an inch? The studio looks calm from the outside, clean lines, neutral colors, soft blues and grays chosen specifically so nothing distracts from the faces on screen. But inside there's a hum. A constant electrical tension that only exists when cameras are live and mistakes are permanent. The lights overhead burn hotter than expected, drying the air, forcing everyone to blink just a little more often. The floor manager stands frozen just off camera, headset pressed tight, eyes flicking between the host, the guest, and the countdown monitor. 5 seconds. 4. Anderson Cooper sits already composed, spine straight, hands relaxed, face neutral in that familiar way viewers trust. He doesn't fidget. He doesn't rehearse his opening line out loud. He simply waits. Waiting is his strength. It always has been. He has learned over decades. That silence unnerves people far more than confrontation. Across from him, Meghan Markle adjusts her posture. It's subtle, barely noticeable, but the cameras catch it. They always do. Her shoulders square, chin lifts, lips curve into a polite smile that signals readiness. This is not new territory for her. Interviews, scrutiny, narratives shaped and reshaped in public. She's been here before. She knows how to play this game. The red light snaps on. Anderson begins, voice calm, measured, familiar. He welcomes the audience, introduces the segment, frames the conversation as reflective, thoughtful, important. The kind of language that suggests safety, no ambush, no spectacle. At first, it works. Meghan speaks smoothly, confidently. Her words are chosen carefully, but delivered naturally enough to feel spontaneous. She talks about perspective, about growth, about lessons learned. The audience nods along. This is the version they recognize, the composed public figure, articulate and emotionally aware. Anderson listens. He always listens first. He nods, occasionally tilting his head, eyes focused but soft. He doesn't interrupt. He lets the rhythm establish itself. In the control room, a producer relaxes slightly, taking a sip of coffee. The segment is landing exactly where they expected it to. Then Anderson shifts. It's almost invisible. A change in phrasing. A slight tightening of focus. He references a past statement, something said years earlier, in a different interview, under different circumstances. He doesn't accuse. He doesn't challenge outright. He simply asks how that statement aligns with what she's saying now. The room tightens. Meghan pauses just for a beat, long enough to register, long enough for the audience to feel it without knowing why. Her eyes flick briefly away, not toward Anderson, not toward the camera, but toward the darkness beyond the lights where producers sit, where the agreed upon boundaries were supposed to live. She answers anyway, confidently. She explains context, pressure, evolution. The answer is polished, convincing, emotionally resonant. Anderson doesn't react. He lets the silence breathe. That's not exactly what you said then. He says quietly, no emphasis, no judgment, just fact. Something shifts behind Meghan's eyes. It's subtle, but it's there. The smile tightens, her hands separate, fingers pressing briefly into her knees before returning to stillness. She responds faster now, voice a fraction sharper, insisting the words were taken out of context, that the narrative has been manipulated. Anderson nods again, still calm. But people can see the footage, he says. They can decide for themselves. The air feels heavier. The audience leans forward without realizing it. Someone in the front row crosses their arms. A camera operator subtly adjusts focus, sensing the moment. Meghan laughs once, a short, controlled sound that doesn't quite fit the tension. With respect, she says, I don't think you're acknowledging what it's like to live under that level of scrutiny. Anderson doesn't flinch. I'm not dismissing that. He replies evenly. I'm asking about the discrepancy. That word, discrepancy, hangs in the air like smoke. Meghan's posture changes now, not dramatically, but definitively. She leans back slightly, reclaiming space, chin lifted. Her tone shifts from explanatory to defensive, from reflective to firm. This feels unfair, she says. And honestly, I didn't come here to be cross-examined. The control room stirs. A producer raises a hand, signaling concern. Another whispers urgently into a headset. This is edging somewhere dangerous. This is live television, and the rules are starting to blur. Anderson leans back too, not mirroring her, but grounding himself. His hands rest flat on his legs. His voice drops slightly, calm to the point of disarming. This isn't a cross-examination, he says. It's an interview. The audience reacts. Not loudly, but collectively. A ripple of tension moves through the room. A few heads turn instinctively, as if looking for reassurance that this is really happening. Meghan's eyes lock onto his. The warmth is gone now. What remains is resolve mixed with irritation. She speaks again, words clipped, controlled, but carrying unmistakable frustration. Then I think the framing is the issue, she says, because this feels less like curiosity and more like judgment. Another pause. Anderson doesn't rush to defend himself. He lets the silence stretch, letting the weight of the moment settle. Silence in live television is risky, but it's also powerful. My responsibility, he finally says, who's to ask the questions people want answered? That's when the room forgets how to breathe. Meghan's jaw tightens. She exhales sharply through her nose, looks down briefly, then back up. The composure she's known for doesn't vanish, but it cracks. Emotion leaks through the edges. Not chaos. Not shouting, just a loss of absolute control. And my responsibility, she replies, is to protect myself from narratives that refuse to evolve. Behind the cameras, a producer mouths, wrap it up. Another shakes their head. It's too late for clean exits now. Anderson nods, slowly absorbing her words. Then we may be at an impasse, he says. The word lands heavier than anything shouted ever could. Meghan sits very still. For a moment, it seems like she might reconsider, might steer the conversation back. Instead, she reaches for her microphone. The movement is deliberate, unhurried, unmistakable. Gasps ripple through the audience, quiet, restrained, but audible. I'm done, she says. No dramatics, no raised voice, just finality. She removes the microphone and places it carefully on the chair beside her. The small metallic sound echoes louder than expected. A producer's voice whispers urgently from off camera, calling her name. She doesn't look back. Anderson remains seated. All right, he says calmly, turning toward the camera. We're going to take a break. The red light stays on a second too long, capturing Meghan's exit, heels clicking softly, back straight head high as she disappears from frame. Cut! When the show returns, something is different. The energy is fractured, the rhythm disrupted. Anderson addresses the audience with professional restraint, offering no explanation beyond acknowledging the moment. No blame, no justification. Within minutes, the internet ignites. Clips circulate at lightning speed. Freeze, frames of eye contact, slow motion analysis of pauses and posture. Commentators choose sides with absolute certainty. Some praise Anderson's composure, calling it journalism doing its job. Others defend Meghan fiercely, arguing she was cornered, misunderstood, pushed into a no-win situation. What happens when the cameras come back on after something has already broken? What happens when a live television moment doesn't end with applause, but with absence? When the broadcast returns from commercial, the chair across from Anderson-Cooper is empty. The absence is louder than anything that came before it. The camera widens slightly, as if instinctively searching for balance, for symmetry, for the person who was supposed to be there. But the space remains unfilled. A single microphone rests on the seat like evidence left behind. Anderson sits exactly where he was before. Same posture, same calm. But something has changed in his eyes. Not guilt, not triumph, awareness. The kind that comes from knowing a moment has crossed from television into history. Welcome back, he says, voice steady, almost gentle. As you saw before the break, our conversation ended unexpectedly. He doesn't explain, he doesn't editorialize, he doesn't chase the drama. That restraint becomes the story just as much as the walk off itself. Behind the cameras, everything is moving at once. Producers whisper urgently into headsets. One is already drafting a statement that may never be released. Another is staring at a monitor, replaying the moment where the tension tipped, asking themselves whether it could have been stopped, whether one different sentence might have changed everything. In the audience, no one moves. They're still processing. This isn't the kind of disruption that feels exciting. It feels unsettling, like watching a bridge crack instead of collapse. Anderson continues transitioning carefully, professionally to the next segment, but the rhythm is gone. The cadence that anchors live television has been fractured. Every word now carries an echo of what just happened. When the show finally ends, there's no applause rush, no easy exhale. The lights dim, the red light clicks off, and for the first time all night, the room breathes again. Meghan is already gone, not storming, not arguing, just gone. In the hallway outside the studio, staff members avoid eye contact with one another. No one knows what to say yet. A junior producer checks their phone and freezes. The clip is already online, not leaked. Posted, shared, exploding. Within 5 minutes, the moment has escaped the building. On social media, the reaction is immediate and mercilessly fast. Short clips dominate timelines, stripped of context, replayed on loops. One version focuses on Anderson's stillness, his refusal to raise his voice. Another isolates Meghan's final words, the moment her composure hardens into resolve. Everyone sees something different, and everyone is sure they're right. Some call it bravery. Others call it disrespect. Some say she walked out to protect herself. Others say she couldn't handle being challenged. The comments section becomes a battlefield of certainty where nuance goes to die. Media outlets scramble. Headlines harden within minutes, each one framing the moment through a different lens. Tense exchange, unexpected walk-off, interview spirals live on air, every word chosen carefully, but pointedly. Former anchors weigh in. Anonymous producers post cryptic threads about what really happens when guests push back. Body language experts slow the footage down frame by frame, analyzing eye contact, jaw tension, breath patterns, posture shifts. They speak with confidence even when they contradict each other completely. Anderson doesn't comment. That silence becomes its own statement. The next morning, the clip is everywhere. Morning shows replay it, podcasts dissect it. Opinion columns argue about power dynamics, about who controls the narrative when someone agrees to sit under studio lights. Was it fair? Was it necessary? Was it inevitable? Supporters of Meghan argue that the interview crossed an invisible line, that it shifted from curiosity into confrontation without consent. They talk about lived experience, about exhaustion, about being asked to defend the same wounds over and over again in public spaces that claim neutrality. Supporters of Anderson argue that neutrality doesn't mean comfort, that journalism isn't supposed to feel safe for the subject, that questions aren't attacks, and accountability isn't cruelty. The debate expands beyond the two people in the room. It becomes about media itself, about who gets to ask questions, about when silence is strength and when it's avoidance, about whether walking away is reclaiming power or surrendering it. And in the middle of it all is that image, an empty chair on live television. Behind the scenes, executives hold meetings. Lawyers review footage. Publicists craft language designed to say something without saying anything. No one wants to inflame the moment, but no one wants to look weak either. Still, no joint statement appears. No apology, no clarification, just competing narratives. Meghan's supporters circulate older interviews, moments where she spoke about boundaries, about being misrepresented. They frame the walk off as a final refusal to play a rigged game. Anderson's defenders circulate his past interviews, moments where he asked difficult questions of powerful people without spectacle, without cruelty. Both sides claim precedent, both sides claim principle. And the truth, whatever it is, sits somewhere in the silence between those claims. Weeks later, the clip is still being referenced. It becomes shorthand, a moment people point to when talking about media pressure, about live television, about the illusion of control. Journalism schools debate it. PR firms use it as a case study. Viewers remember exactly where they were when they watched it unfold. But no one ever fully agrees on what it meant, and that's the lasting impact. Not outrage, Not scandal, but discomfort, because the moment didn't resolve cleanly. There was no winner declared, no apology issued, no final words spoken. Just two people asserting their version of power in very different ways, one through stillness, the other through exit, and maybe that's why it lingers. Because it forces the question back onto the viewer. When someone refuses to answer, is that strength or evasion? When someone refuses to soften a question, is that integrity or control? When live television cracks, do we blame the pressure or the people who stood under it? And in the end, what makes this moment endure isn't the walk off itself, or even the question that triggered it. It's the silence that followed. The silence where no one rushed to clean it up, where no press release arrived to neatly explain what viewers were supposed to feel. Just an empty chair, a composed host, and millions of people left to sit with their own interpretation. Because live television doesn't offer rewrites. Once the words are spoken, once the body language shifts, once someone decides to stay seated or stand up and leave, the moment belongs to everyone watching. Control changes hands in ways no producer can fully predict. Authority isn't declared, it's revealed, sometimes through stillness, sometimes through refusal. For Anderson Cooper, the power was in restraint, in letting questions stand without apology, in trusting that silence could speak louder than defense. For Meghan Markle, the power was in departure, in deciding that participation itself was the leverage, and withdrawing it when the exchange no longer felt aligned with her terms. Neither screamed, neither exploded. And that's exactly why the moment hit so hard. There was no villain edit, no triumphant ending. Just two people asserting boundaries in opposite directions, under lights that never blinked. One stayed, one left, and the audience was left holding the weight of it. That unresolved tension is why this moment keeps resurfacing. Because it mirrors something uncomfortable and familiar, the feeling of watching power shift without permission, of realizing that truth, control, and dignity don't always coexist neatly in the same space, especially not on live television. So maybe the real question isn't who won. Maybe it's why we need there to be a winner at all. Was it accountability colliding with autonomy? Journalism meeting its limits? Or simply two humans refusing to yield in a system built on performance and perception? There's no final answer, and maybe that's the point. If this moment stayed with you, if it made you uncomfortable, reflective, or divided, say why in the comments. Like the video if you believe unresolved conversations matter. And subscribe, because the most revealing stories aren't always about what gets said, but about what happens when no one backs down and the cameras keep rolling.